My son told me he was taking me for a routine checkup. Instead, he drove me to a nursing home in my own car, handed me a bag he and his wife had packed for me, and took my house keys. They left me in a sterile room believing they had taken everything. They thought they had won, but they made one mistake. They left me with my memories, my mind, and a plan. Before I tell you how I turned their world upside down, I want to know where you're listening to my story from. Let me know in the comments below. And please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe that respect for our elders is non-negotiable. The silence was the first thing that hit you. Here in the house I built with my own two hands. The silence had gotten louder since Rose passed. It was a Tuesday morning. The Atlanta sun was trying its best to cut through the morning haze, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. I sat at our little oak table, my hand resting on the back of her empty chair. The wood was still smooth, just like she liked it. For 2 years I had sat like this, drinking my coffee and talking to her as if she were still right there, about to tell me to stop worrying so much. The smell of sawdust and old memories clung to the air in this house, a perfume only I could appreciate. Then the phone rang, its shrill sound slicing through the peace. It was my son Jamal. His voice was different these days. It had a certain polish to it, a smooth corporate tone that didn't sound like the boy I'd taught how to ride a bike in the driveway right outside this window. It sounded like his wife Tiffany. "Hey Dad, just checking in. You doing okay?" The question was a formality, a box to be ticked. I told him I was fine, that the azaleas were about to bloom. I tried to talk about things that mattered, things with roots, but he was always in a hurry. He pivoted the way a salesman does when he's about to make his pitch. "So Dad, Tiffany and I were talking. We're a little worried about you in that big house. All those stairs. It's a lot for one person to handle." I gripped the phone tighter. It wasn't the first time he'd said this. The words were always coded in concern, but they felt sharp underneath. "I'm fine, Jamal. I've been managing these stairs for 40 years. He sighed, a sound of practiced patience. "I know, Dad, I know. But things are different now. We just think maybe it's time to consider some other options. For your safety." Options. That was her word. Tiffany's word. It was a sterile, impersonal word for uprooting a man's entire life, for erasing his history. I could almost hear her whispering in the background, coaching him. I thought about the back porch I added myself, the one where Rose and I would sit and watch the fireflies on summer nights. I thought about the pencil marks on the door frame in the hallway, tracking Jamal's height from a little boy to a man who now stood taller than me but somehow seemed smaller. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was a living thing filled with the echoes of our laughter, our arguments, our lives. It was the last piece of Rose I had left. "There are no other options, son. This is my home." The line went quiet for a moment. I knew he was looking to his wife for the next line. "Look, Dad," he finally said, his voice strained. "Tiffany and I are going to come over this weekend. We can talk about it properly then. We just want what's best for you." He hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. A cold feeling washed over me, a feeling that had nothing to do with the morning chill. A conversation wasn't what they wanted. They wanted a surrender. And they were coming to get it. That Saturday, their car, a sleek white SUV that looked completely out of place in my humble driveway, pulled up right on time. Jamal got out first, looking uncomfortable in a pressed polo shirt. Tiffany followed, gliding out of the passenger seat like she was stepping onto a red carpet. She wore a bright sundress and sunglasses so big they hid half her face. She was holding a large, glossy folder. My stomach tightened. I knew that folder meant business. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come on in," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Tiffany entered with a wide, bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Elijah, the place looks charming," she said, her eyes scanning everything. She wasn't looking at our family photos on the mantelpiece or the hand-carved rocking chair in the corner. She was assessing, calculating. Her compliments felt like appraisals. "Such good bones, and this neighborhood is really becoming desirable." Jamal lingered by the doorway, avoiding my gaze, fiddling with his phone. He was a guest in the house he grew up in. Tiffany walked through the living room, running her hand along the back of the sofa. With a few updates, the resale value on this property would be incredible. The potential is just... wow. I didn't say anything. I just watched her, this stranger who had my son's heart and was now coming for my home. She finally settled on the sofa, patting the cushion next to her for Jamal to sit. He did like an obedient child. She opened the glossy folder. It was filled with brochures, pictures of pristine buildings with perfectly green lawns and smiling silver-haired residents. Golden Years Living, Serenity Meadows Retirement Community, Oakwood Gardens. Each page was a sterile cookie-cutter version of a life I didn't want. We did some research, Tiffany said, her voice bright and cheerful. These places are amazing. They have activities, nursing staff, on-site prepared meals. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing, Dad. Jamal nodded along, finally looking at me. It would give us peace of mind, Dad, knowing you're safe and being looked after. The anger that had been simmering inside me began to boil. I looked at my son, at the man he had become. I saw a stranger wearing his face. Peace of mind for who Jamal. For you, I stood up my legs feeling stronger than they had all morning. I am safe. I am being looked after. By myself. Just like I have for 75 years. I pointed to the brochures. I don't want your activities or your prepared meals. I want my home. The home your mother and I built. The home you said you never wanted to leave. For a second, a flicker of something, maybe shame, crossed Jamal's face. But it was gone as quickly as it came. Tiffany stepped in, her sweet tone becoming firm like steel wrapped in velvet. She didn't look at Jamal. She looked directly at me. We're only thinking of you, Elijah, she said. The sound of my first name from her lips was a deliberate sting. It was a reminder that she saw me not as a father figure, but as a problem to be managed. An obstacle. You've done so much for everyone your whole life. It's time to let someone else take care of things. Sometimes we need other people to decide what's best for us. The sheer audacity of that statement took my breath away. Decide for me. In my own home. That's when I remembered a conversation I had with Rose years ago, not long after Jamal and Tiffany got married. We were sitting on the back porch watching the sun go down. Be careful with that one, Eli, Rose had said, her voice soft but serious. She's got eyes that are always measuring. She looks at our house, not at our son. I had told her not to worry, that Jamal was happy. How wrong I had been. Rose had seen it from the very beginning. I looked at the two of them on my sofa, a united front against me. I knew then that this was not a discussion. It was a declaration of war. The answer is no, I said, my voice low and final. This conversation is over. You need to leave. Jamal looked stunned, but Tiffany's smile never wavered. She slowly closed the folder, a picture of perfect composure. She stood up, smoothing down her dress. Okay, she said, her voice light and airy. We understand. You need time to think. They walked to the door. Jamal paused, turned back to me, his face a mess of confusion and guilt. He opened his mouth to say something, but Tiffany put a hand on his arm. Let's go, honey. As she walked out the door, she glanced back over her shoulder at me, and her smile was gone. In its place was a look of cold, calculating resolve. That's all right, she said, her voice barely a whisper, but it carried across the room like a gunshot. There are other ways. Then they were gone. I stood there in the deafening silence of my home, the brochures still sitting on the coffee table like a threat. I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. And I had a feeling their other ways would be far worse than a few glossy pamphlets. The days that followed their visit were heavy with a silence that felt different. It wasn't the quiet peace of solitude anymore. It was the tense waiting silence of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. I busied myself in my workshop, the familiar scent of cedar and pine a small comfort. I tried to convince myself that I had been firm, that they had heard me. I tried to believe my son would not betray the memory of his mother. I was a fool. On Wednesday, the phone rang. It was Jamal, and his voice was thick with an apology I wanted so desperately to believe. Dad, I am so sorry, he began. Tiffany and we were completely out of line. We overstepped. It's just, we worry. You know, I listened. My heart caught between caution and a father's hope. I was just trying to show you that we cared, and it came out all wrong, he continued, his tone dripping with sincerity. To make it up to you, I want to take you out. Tiffany found this great new clinic over in Buckhead. Top-of-the-line doctors. I'd feel so much better if we could just get you a full proper checkup. My treat. Please, Dad, let me do this right. The hook was perfectly baited. It wasn't about the house, it was about my health. It was an act of love and olive branch. And because I still saw the little boy in the man, the boy who used to follow me around my workshop holding a toy hammer, I agreed. I chose to believe in the son I had raised, not the man his wife was shaping. That was my second mistake. He picked me up the next morning. Tiffany wasn't with him, which made the entire thing feel more genuine, just a father and son. But the car felt different. My old sedan, the one Rose and I took on road trips, felt like it was holding its breath. Jamal was cheerful, talking about sports, about a promotion at his job, about anything and everything except what mattered. I noticed we weren't heading towards the Emory Medical Campus or any of the hospital districts I knew. We were driving further out into a quieter, more residential area filled with large oak trees and sprawling brick buildings. "This is a strange place for a clinic, son," I said, a knot forming in my gut. "Oh, it's one of those new wellness centers," he said quickly, not looking at me. "Very modern, very private." He turned into a long, winding driveway. At the end of it stood a large, imposing brick building with a sign out front. The sign was carved in elegant script, but the name on it sent a chill down my spine. It didn't say clinic or medical center. It said Oakwood Gardens. It looked less like a place of healing and more like a final stop. My mind started racing. This wasn't right. "Jamal, pull over," I said, my voice low. "What is this place?" He ignored me, pulling right up to the grand entrance. "Come on, Dad. Our appointment is at 10. He got out of the car, his movements stiff and unnatural. He wouldn't look at me. I knew then. I had walked right into the trap. The moment we stepped through the automatic glass doors, the smell hit me. A sterile chemical scent of antiseptic mixed with something else. Something faintly of decay and resignation. The lobby was vast and dimly lit, polished floors reflecting the pale light from high windows. A few elderly people sat slumped in armchairs, their gazes distant and unfocused. A woman in a wheelchair stared blankly at a television that wasn't on. The only sound was the squeak of a janitor's cart somewhere down a long hallway. This wasn't a place of wellness. It was a place of waiting. Waiting for the end. And then I saw Tiffany. She was standing by the reception desk, smiling, holding that same glossy folder from the other day. She waved at us, a bright, triumphant little wave. My blood ran cold. She walked over her heels, clicking on the linoleum. "See, isn't it lovely?" she said, her voice echoing in the oppressive quiet. I turned to my son who had driven me here under a lie. Jamal. The word was a plea, a demand, a cry of a broken heart all at once. "What is this? What have you done?" He flinched, finally looking at me, and in his eyes I saw not malice but the pathetic cowardice of a man who had sold his soul and was ashamed of the price. He couldn't answer. Tiffany answered for him. She stepped up to the receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes, and placed the folder on the counter. Her smile was blinding. "Good morning," she said. "We're here to check in Mr. Monroe." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air left my lungs. I grabbed Jamal's arm, my grip surprisingly strong. "No," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in decades. "Jamal, you tell her. You tell her we're leaving. Right now." He just stood there, frozen, a statue of a son. Tiffany turned back to me, her smile gone, replaced by a look of condescending pity. She placed a hand on my shoulder, and I shook it off like it was on fire. "Now, Elijah, let's not make a scene," she said, her voice low and sharp. "This is for the best. We've handled everything." She slid the folder across the counter to the receptionist. "The paperwork is all in order." Through the plastic cover, I saw a document, a medical power of attorney, and I saw my own signature at the bottom from years ago after a small surgery. A document I had signed in trust, a tool I had given my son to protect me, now being used as a weapon to imprison me. They had it all planned. Everything. They had a room waiting. A nurse appeared holding a small duffel bag. My duffel bag. I recognized the scuff marks on the leather. They had packed my things. They had gone into my home, through my drawers, and packed a bag for my own exile. That was the final, most intimate betrayal. The nurse tried to lead me down the hall, but I stood my ground. I looked at Jamal one last time. "Your mother," I choked out. "Your mother would be so ashamed of you." For the first time, a tear welled in his eye, but he did nothing. Tiffany stepped between us. She held out her hand. "The keys, Elijah. The house and the car. We'll keep them safe for you." It wasn't a request. I didn't move. Jamal reached into my jacket pocket, his hands shaking, and pulled them out. The keys to my life. He placed them in his wife's waiting palm. She closed her fingers around them, a look of pure victory on her face. They led me to a room at the end of a long, quiet corridor. It was small, painted a pale, lifeless yellow. It had a bed, a small dresser, and a window with a view of a brick wall. The nurse put my bag on the bed. "You can get settled in. Lunch is at noon." Jamal mumbled something about visiting soon, about this being the right thing to do. Tiffany just smiled. "We'll manage everything from here," she said. Then they left. The door clicked shut behind them, the sound of a lock sealing my fate. I stumbled to the window. I was just in time to see them walk out the front entrance. Tiffany was laughing, tossing my car keys in the air and catching them. My car. She got into the driver's seat, Jamal got in the passenger side, and they drove away. They drove away in my car from the prison they had built for me to go live in the home I had built with my wife. The shock finally gave way, and a wave of despair so heavy it felt like drowning washed over me. I sank onto the hard mattress, the fight completely gone from me. They had won. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe 2. The pale yellow walls seemed to be closing in. This was it. This was how my story was going to end. A proud man, a carpenter, a husband, a father, reduced to a resident in room 2B waiting for lunch. Then I thought of Rose. I thought of her in the final months when the sickness was trying to steal her from us. She never once complained. She never once gave in to despair. I remembered her grabbing my hand one night, her grip weak, but her eyes fierce. "Straighten your back, Eli," she'd whispered. "A Monroe man doesn't bow his head. You fight. You always fight." Her voice was as clear in my head as if she were sitting right next to me, and something inside me shifted. The despair didn't just disappear. It burned away, leaving behind something hard and cold and clear. Rage. But it was a quiet rage, a focused rage. They thought they had buried me, but they had only planted a seed. They had been thorough. They took my keys, my car, my home. They had the power of attorney. They left me in a place where they controlled the visitors, the calls, the schedule. They thought they had stripped me of all my power. But they had overlooked 2 things. They had left me my mind, which was sharper than they could ever imagine. And in their haste, in their arrogance, they had forgotten about the small, simple object in my pocket. My cell phone. They had taken the keys to my house, but they had left me the key to their complete and utter destruction. It was right there, buzzing silently in the palm of my hand. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the small room like the closing of a coffin lid. I stumbled to the window, my hands pressed against the cool glass. I was just in time to see them walk out the front entrance. Tiffany was laughing a bright, ugly sound. She tossed my car keys in the air and caught them with a flourish. My car. The old Buick Rose and I had taken on a dozen road trips, the car I polished by hand every other Saturday. She slid into the driver's seat, the place that had only ever belonged to me or Rose. Jamal got in the passenger side, his head bowed, and then they were gone. They drove away in my car from the prison they had built for me to go live in the home I had built with my wife. The shock finally gave way, and a wave of despair so heavy it felt like drowning washed over me. I sank onto the hard mattress, the springs groaning in protest. The fight was completely gone. The pale yellow walls seemed to be closing in the air, thick with the smell of bleach and surrender. This was it. This was how my story was going to end. A proud man, a carpenter, a husband, a father, reduced to a resident in room 2B waiting for lunch. I buried my face in my hands, the rough texture of my palms, a stark reminder of a life of work and purpose that now felt 1,000,000 miles away. They had won. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe 2. Time had lost its meaning. The sun began to set, painting the brick wall outside my window in shades of orange and red, the colors of a dying fire. And then I thought of Rose. I thought of her in the final months when the sickness was trying to steal her from us. She never once complained. She never once gave in to despair. I remembered her grabbing my hand one night, her grip surprisingly strong, her eyes fierce in her tired face. "Straighten your back, Eli," she'd whispered, her voice raspy but firm. "A Monroe man doesn't bow his head. You fight. You always fight." Her voice was as clear in my head as if she were sitting right next to me. A jolt went through me, sharp and clean. I lifted my head and straightened my back. The grief was still there, a deep, aching wound for the son I had lost. But something else was rising through it. The despair didn't just disappear. It burned away, leaving behind something hard and cold and clear. Rage. But it was a quiet rage, a focused rage. The fire in my chest hadn't gone out. It had just banked low, turning into a hot, patient coal. They thought they had buried me, but they had only planted a seed. I stood up and began to pace the small room, my mind for the first time in days working with sharp, cold clarity. They had been thorough. They took my keys, my car, my home. They had the power of attorney. They left me in a place where they controlled the visitors, the calls, the schedule. They thought they had stripped me of all my power, leaving me as helpless as a child. But they had overlooked two things. They had left me my mind, which was sharper than they could ever imagine. And in their haste, in their arrogance, they had forgotten about the small, simple object in my pocket, my cell phone. I pulled it out. The screen lit up a beacon in the dimming room. They saw a tired old man. They didn't see the carpenter who knew how to measure twice and cut once. They didn't see the man who knew that to build something strong, you first need a solid plan. I was not a prisoner. I was a craftsman. And this was just a new kind of project. I needed tools. I needed allies. My mind flashed back to the chaotic check-in, the faces in the lobby, the staff. Most were busy, their expressions professional but distant. But there was one, a young nurse, the one who brought my bag to the room. Her name tag said Imani. When she had looked at me, her eyes weren't filled with the pity I saw in the others. They were filled with a quiet understanding, a flicker of empathy. That was a start. I opened my contact list, my thumb scrolling past the names of old friends, neighbors, family members who didn't know what had happened. Then I saw the name I was looking for. Marcus Thorne, attorney at law, my friend for over 30 years, a man as sharp as a freshly honed chisel, a man Rose had trusted completely. A plan began to form not all at once but in pieces, like fitting together the joints of a fine piece of furniture. It was a long shot full of risks. But it was a plan. It was a weapon. They had taken the keys to my house, but they had left me the key to their complete and utter destruction. It was right there, buzzing silently in the palm of my hand. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. The next morning, the sun rose on a different man. I was still in room 2B. The pale yellow walls were still my cage, but the man inside it was no longer a prisoner. He was a general. And this sterile, quiet facility was my command center. The first rule of any good strategy is to understand the terrain and the enemy. So I began to play the part they had assigned to me. I became Resident Monroe. When they brought the bland, lukewarm oatmeal, I ate it without complaint. When they handed me a small paper cup with my morning pills, I swallowed them with a nod. I was quiet, compliant, and slow in my movements. To the staff, I was just another old man fading into the routine. To them, it was surrender. To me, it was camouflage. My primary target was Imani. I watched her. She moved differently than the other nurses. They were efficient, which I respected, but they were hurried. They saw tasks, not people. Imani saw people. She would pause for an extra second to adjust a pillow. She would make eye contact. She listened. For 2 days I said nothing of my plan. I simply engaged her. I asked her where she was from. I told her about my workshop, about the smell of fresh-cut cedar. One afternoon, as she was checking my blood pressure, I told her about the rocking chair I'd made for Rose when she was pregnant with Jamal. I described how I'd carved her initials RM into the wood right under the armrest. A man's hands should build things that last longer than he does, I told her. She smiled a genuine warm smile. My granddaddy used to say things like that, she said. He was a bricklayer. I had found my opening. The next day, I waited until she was on her rounds and the hallway was quiet. Imani, I said, my voice low. Can I speak with you for a moment, in private? She looked around, then stepped into my room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I didn't waste time. I told her everything. The lie about the checkup, the stolen keys, the power of attorney, the house. I kept my voice even, laying out the facts like I was explaining a blueprint. I saw the understanding dawn in her eyes, followed by a wave of anger on my behalf. That's just awful, Mr. Monroe, she whispered. I knew something wasn't right. That's when I played my card. I need to make a phone call, I said. A private one. To my lawyer. But I can't risk anyone overhearing me. I need 5 minutes. That's all. I just need you to make sure no one comes in. The warmth in her eyes was replaced by conflict. She wrung her hands. Mr. Monroe, I can't. If my supervisor finds out, I could lose my job. I understood. I was asking her to risk her livelihood for a man she barely knew. I looked her straight in the eye. I know what I'm asking, but I am telling you as God is my witness, they are trying to steal my life from me. That house is all I have left of my wife. I can't let them take it. I saw her wrestle with the decision. Her gaze drifted around my small, impersonal room. My own granddaddy, she said softly. He built his house from the ground up just like you. He would have hated a place like this. He would have said it had no soul. She took a deep breath. Okay, she said. 5 minutes. I'll stand in the doorway. If anyone comes, I'll tell them you're resting. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with adrenaline. This was it, the first shot. I pulled out my phone and quickly scrolled to the letter M, Marcus Thorne. I pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring, his voice as crisp and no-nonsense as ever. Thorne. Marcus. It's me. Elijah. There was a brief pause. Elijah. Where are you? I tried calling your house. Marcus, listen to me. I said, my voice urgent and low. I'm in serious trouble. Jamal and his wife, they've put me in a nursing home, Oakwood Gardens. They lied to me. They have some kind of medical power of attorney and they've taken my house. I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Marcus didn't ask 100 questions. He was a professional. He got it. Don't say anything else over the phone, he said, his voice now cold as steel. I'll be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. As your legal counsel, they can't deny me access. Sit tight, Elijah. Don't talk to them. Don't sign anything. We're going to fix this. He hung up. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Hope. It was a powerful thing. Imani gave me a small nervous nod from the doorway and then continued on her rounds. The first piece was in place. Later that evening, as if on cue, my phone rang. It was Jamal. I let it ring a few times, then answered, pitching my voice to sound weak, tired. Hello, Dad, it's me. Just calling to see how you are. Are you settling in okay? His voice was full of that fake, cheerful concern. It was like listening to a bad actor. It's fine, son, I said, putting a slight quaver in my voice. The food is, well, it's a roof over my head. That's the spirit, Dad, he said, relieved that I wasn't fighting. You'll get used to it. Tiffany and I will come visit in a week or so once you're all settled. We're just so busy getting the house in order. I could hear the smile in his voice as he said, the house. I closed my eyes. That's fine, son, I whispered. You do what you need to do. I hung up the phone. The curtain had just gone up on my little play. He heard a frail old man giving up. He had no idea he was talking to a general on the eve of battle, and my attorney was coming in the morning. The night was long, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I didn't feel alone in the dark. I felt Rose's fighting spirit next to me, and I felt the promise of Marcus's arrival. The next morning I was awake before the sun. I went through the motions of their routine, but my mind was 1,000 miles away, plodding, waiting. 10 o'clock. I watched the second hand on the cheap plastic wall clock tick closer. At precisely 10:01 I heard it, raised voices from down the hall. I went to my door, pressing my ear against the cool painted wood. I could hear Tiffany's voice, sickly sweet, but with an edge of hardened steel. I'm sorry, but he's resting. He's not accepting any visitors today. Then I heard a voice that cut through the years, deep, calm, and unshakable. It was Marcus. Ma'am, he said, and I could picture him standing there tall and unmovable in his tailored suit. I am not a visitor. I am his legal counsel. Denying an individual access to their attorney is a serious violation of their rights. I can explain the specific statutes to you, or you can step aside. There was a moment of shocked silence. Tiffany wasn't used to people who didn't bend to her will. I heard her stammer something, but the authority in her voice was gone. A few seconds later, there was a firm knock on my door. I opened it to see Marcus standing there, his briefcase in hand. His face was a mask of professionalism, but in his eyes I saw the righteous anger of a loyal friend. Behind him, Tiffany stood fuming. Her arms crossed, her perfect smile replaced by a venomous glare. Marcus walked into my room, and the entire atmosphere shifted. It was no longer a cage, it was a courtroom, and my trial was about to begin. He closed the door, firmly shutting her out. We sat in the two uncomfortable chairs by the window. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid out the whole ugly story from the first phone call about the stairs to the moment Jamal pulled the keys from my pocket. I kept my voice steady, reporting the facts without emotion like a witness on the stand. Marcus listened without interruption, his hands steepled in front of him. He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. They were arrogant, he finally said, his voice a low growl. And greed makes people sloppy. They made a critical mistake, Elijah. He leaned forward, tapping his pen on his briefcase. That medical power of attorney, it's a powerful document. It allows Jamal to make decisions about your health care if you are incapacitated. But that's all it does. It gives him zero, and I mean zero, authority over your finances, your property, or your assets. As long as you are of sound mind and you are as sharp as you were 20 years ago, he can't sell your house, he can't touch your bank accounts, he can't do a thing. A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. It was the first glimmer of daylight I'd seen since this nightmare began. So, what do we do? I asked. Marcus opened his briefcase with two sharp clicks. The sound was like a judge's gavel. We don't just defend Elijah, we attack. We don't just block them, we remove the entire chessboard. He laid out the plan, each step a hammer blow against their scheme. First, he said, pulling out a document. You are going to sign a new durable power of attorney. This one is comprehensive. It covers everything financial, legal, property. And you are going to appoint me as your agent. The moment you sign this, it revokes and supersedes any and all previous documents. Jamal's medical POA will be worthless. He slid the paper and a pen across the small table. Second, with that authority, I am going to contact a trusted real estate agent first thing this afternoon. We're going to list the house for a quick sale. Cash buyer, no contingencies. We might take a small hit on the price, but we'll have it sold and closed before they even know what's happening. My mind reeled. Sell the house, the home Rose and I built. It was a painful thought, but I understood the ruthless logic. It was the only way. And the money I asked. Third, Marcus said, his eyes glinting. The proceeds of the sale will not go to your current bank account, which they might try to access. They will be deposited directly into a new irrevocable trust that I will establish in your name. You will be the sole beneficiary. They won't be able to touch a single penny of it. We are going to build a fortress around you, my friend. As he was speaking, he paused, a softer look coming over his face. He looked at me, not as a client, but as a friend. You know, Rose pulled me aside at your 50th anniversary party, he said, his voice quiet. The whole place was full of music and laughter. She grabbed my arm and said, Marcus, you promise me. If anything ever happens to me, you look out for my Elijah. He's a strong man, but his heart is too soft for his own good. I told her I would. He looked down at the papers. I'm just keeping a promise, Elijah. Tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't just about the house or the money anymore. It was about honoring her. It was about being the man she knew I was. Let's do it, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I needed a witness. I told Marcus to wait a moment. I stepped into the hall and found Amani. I asked her if she would be willing to act as a legal witness for a document. She saw the papers in Marcus's hands, saw the look on my face, and simply nodded. She came in, signed the witness line on the document with a steady hand, and then left with a quiet, "Good luck, Mr. Monroe." I took the pen. My hand was shaking, not from age, but from the weight of the moment. I signed my name, Elijah Monroe. The signature was firm, clear. It was the signature of a man taking back his life. Marcus gathered the documents, his movements efficient and purposeful. "The fight has begun, Elijah," he said as he stood to leave. "Now you just need to keep playing your part. Be weak. Be confused. Let them think they have you right where they want you." He shook my hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and then he was gone. I walked back to the window, watching him cross the manicured lawn, a soldier leaving base with his orders. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt the warmth of hope spread through my chest. That evening I lay on my bed, feeling the exhaustion of the day. I picked up my phone, my fingers idly scrolling. I found Tiffany's social media page. It was public. And there it was, a new post from just an hour ago. It was a picture of her and Jamal standing on the front porch of my house, my home. They were smiling, holding a glass of wine, the setting sun glinting behind them. The caption read, "Making this beautiful house our forever home. So excited for our new beginning. Shad blessed." I looked at their smiling, triumphant faces. They were celebrating on stolen ground, completely oblivious that the ground was about to crumble right out from under them. I smiled. A true, genuine smile. Let them post their pictures. The eviction notice was already on its way. The 2 weeks that followed were a masterclass in patience. I became the model resident of Oakwood Gardens. I was a ghost in the hallways, a quiet old man who kept to himself. I ate what they gave me. I slept when they told me, and I spoke only when spoken to. To my son and his wife, my silence was the sound of defeat. They believed they had broken me. In reality, I was a coiled spring, and every passing day the tension grew tighter. While I was playing the part of a man fading away, Marcus was a whirlwind of focused activity on the outside. Our phone calls were brief coded updates, my secret lifeline to the war being waged on my behalf. One afternoon he called. "Elijah," he said, his voice low. "We have an offer. A young family, 2 kids. They lost out on 3 other houses in the neighborhood. They're eager. It's a cash offer, which means we can close in days, not weeks. It's about 10% under what we could get if we waited, but it's clean and it's fast." I looked around my little yellow room. I thought of a young family's laughter echoing in the halls where Rose and I had grown old together. It felt right. A family, I said. Rose would have liked that. "Take it, Marcus. Sell my home." While Marcus was dismantling their future, Jamal called with updates on how he was dismantling my past. He'd call while he was at the house, his voice echoing slightly. "Hey, Dad, we're making great progress here," he'd say, his tone full of false enthusiasm. "We had to get a dumpster for all the old stuff in the attic. You and Mom sure kept a lot of junk." Junk. He called her treasured photo albums junk. Her collection of antique gardening books. The cedar chest I built for her on our first anniversary filled with the linens she had embroidered by hand. A cold, quiet fury settled deep in my bones. But on the phone my voice was a weak whisper. "Oh, okay, son, if you think it's for the best." His relief was palpable. He was so eager to believe his own lies, to believe that I was consenting to the erasure of my own life. He had no idea that every box he threw away was just another nail in his own coffin. He was so busy clearing out the house he didn't notice the inspector and the appraiser who came and went quietly one Tuesday afternoon. He was so proud of the new coat of paint he was putting on the porch he didn't see the real estate agent showing the property to the young family on Thursday morning while he and Tiffany were at work. The final pieces of the plan moved with breathtaking speed. Marcus called on a Friday. "It's done, Elijah. The papers are signed. The house is no longer in your name. The funds have been wired directly into the new trust account. They are secure. We are ready for the final move. Just give me the word." I felt a sense of profound, calm finality. The anchor to my past was gone, but in its place I felt the freedom of a ship that had just cut its lines, ready to sail into a new dawn. All I needed was the perfect moment to strike. Tiffany, in her infinite arrogance, handed it to me on a silver platter. She called that evening, her voice like honey mixed with poison. "Elijah, sweetie," she cooed. "Just wanted to let you know Jamal and I are having a little housewarming party tomorrow night. Just a few friends over to celebrate our new home." I could hear the clinking of glasses in the background. They were already celebrating. "We know you're not really up for socializing," she continued, her condescension dripping from every word. "So you don't need to worry about coming, of course. It would be too much for you. You just rest up and get your strength back." The insult was so profound, so complete, that I almost laughed. She was barring me from my own home, from a party celebrating its theft and framing it as an act of kindness. This was it, the peak of their hubris, the perfect stage for their downfall. I let out a long, weary sigh for her benefit. "Thank you for letting me know, Tiffany," I said, my voice a fragile whisper. "That's very thoughtful of you. I'll just rest here." "We knew you'd understand," she chirped. "Talk to you next week." She hung up. I sat there in the silence of my room, the phone still in my hand, thoughtful of her. The word echoed in my mind. I looked out the window, not at the brick wall, but at the reflection of my own face in the darkening glass. The man looking back at me was not weak. He was not defeated. His eyes were clear, and they were shining with a cold, hard light. The performance was over. It was time for the curtain to rise on the final act. I calmly scrolled through my contacts and pressed the button to call Marcus. He answered immediately. "Marcus," I said, and my voice was no longer the weak whisper of a tired old man. It was strong. It was steady. It was the voice of a man who was about to reclaim his life. "It's time. They're having a party tomorrow night. They'll be there. All their friends will be there." I paused, savoring the moment. Let's give them a housewarming they will never forget. The way Marcus described it to me later, the party was in full swing. The sound of laughter and loud music spilled out onto the lawn of the house. Through the front windows you could see them all. Jamal playing the proud host, a role he had never earned. And Tiffany, the queen of the castle, holding court in the center of the living room, a glass of champagne in her hand. She was telling some story, her friends hanging on every word. They had even taken down Rose's watercolor paintings from the living room wall and replaced them with some cheap abstract art that looked like a paint can had exploded. They were so comfortable in their stolen kingdom, so certain of their victory. They had forgotten the one rule every good carpenter knows: a faulty foundation will always bring the house down. At exactly 8:15 the doorbell rang, a sharp, clear sound that cut through the music. Jamal, smiling, excused himself from a conversation. "Probably the Millers. They're always late," he said with a confident laugh. He swung the door open, his smile ready, a welcome on his lips. But the smile froze on his face. It melted away, replaced by a look of utter confusion. Standing on his front porch were not the Millers. It was Marcus Thorne, dressed in a dark suit, his face calm and unreadable. Next to him stood a young couple, a man and a woman, holding hands, looking nervous but determined. And standing just behind them on either side of the walkway were two uniformed Atlanta police officers. The porch light cast long, somber shadows. It was not a party. It was a reckoning. Marcus Jamal stammered, his voice suddenly small. What the hell are you doing here?" Before Marcus could answer, Tiffany appeared at Jamal's shoulder, her smile still plastered on her face, though it faltered slightly when she saw the police. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice tight. Marcus's gaze was like ice. He looked past her directly at Jamal. "I'm here with my clients," he said, his voice level and clear, carrying over the sudden lull in the party music. He gestured to the young couple. "This is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They're the new owners of this property." For a moment there was complete silence. Then Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a brittle, ugly sound. "New owners? That's ridiculous. You must be confused. This is our house. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have guests." She tried to close the door. Marcus didn't move. He simply held up a hand, and from his inside jacket pocket, he produced a thick sheaf of papers. He held it up for them to see. "There is no confusion, ma'am," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "This is a notarized deed of sale filed with the Fulton County Clerk's office this afternoon at 4 p.m. The property was sold by its legal owner, Mr. Elijah Monroe, through his designated and legally appointed power of attorney. This is their house." He paused, letting the words sink in, each one a hammer blow. "Which means you, your husband, and all of your guests are trespassing." The color drained from Tiffany's face. Jamal looked like he had been physically struck, his mouth hanging open, his face a mask of disbelief. The guests inside, who had been watching the scene unfold, fell completely silent. The music was the only thing still making a cheerful sound, a grotesque counterpoint to the horror dawning on their faces. Tiffany found her voice first. It wasn't a voice of reason, it was a shriek. "No, you can't. That's impossible. This is our home. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you." The younger of the two police officers stepped forward. He was calm, professional, his voice radiating an authority that could not be argued with. "Ma'am," he said, "this appears to be a civil matter that has been legally executed. Our presence here is simply to keep the peace. Right now the Smiths are the legal owners, and they wish for you to vacate their property. You need to gather your personal belongings and leave. Now." The collapse was total and immediate. It was like watching a dam break. Jamal just stood there shaking his head, mumbling, "No, Dad wouldn't. He wouldn't." Tiffany completely unraveled. She screamed at the police, she screamed at Marcus, she screamed at the Smiths. But it was the screaming of a powerless rage. Her friends, the ones who had been laughing at her stories moments before, began to back away, grabbing their purses and jackets, avoiding her eyes. They scurried out the back door, melting into the night, abandoning their queen. The officers were patient, but firm. They escorted a weeping, hysterical Tiffany and a completely broken Jamal through the house as they grabbed a few essential items. They walked past the half-eaten food, the abandoned glasses of champagne, the ruins of their victory party. The walk from the living room to the front door was the longest walk of their lives. They were forced to exit the house under the watchful eyes of the police, the new owners and half a dozen neighbors who were now peering out their windows, drawn by the commotion. They stood on the sidewalk, bathed in the cold, unforgiving glow of a streetlight. A moment ago, they were masters of the castle. Now they were homeless. Marcus gave a polite nod to the Smiths, who cautiously stepped over the threshold into their new home. Marcus told me later that his last image of them was of Tiffany, her face streaked with tears and makeup, screaming at Jamal, blaming him while he just stood there, a hollowed-out man staring at the front door of the house that was no longer his. When Marcus called me and told me all of this, I didn't cheer. I didn't feel a rush of vengeful joy. I simply closed my eyes and breathed out a long, slow breath. It was the quiet, deep satisfaction a carpenter feels not when he drives the final nail, but when he steps back and sees that the house he has built is perfectly level, solid, and standing right on its foundation. Order had been restored. The same night they were cast out onto the street, I was packing my own small bag. There was no drama, no shouting. Marcus had arranged everything. I walked out of the front doors of Oakwood Gardens, not as a discarded old man, but as the architect of my own life. I said a quiet goodbye to Imani, thanking her for her courage and her kindness. I didn't tell her what was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise. I stepped into the back of a waiting car, arranged by Marcus, and as we pulled away, I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. Marcus told me they stood on that sidewalk for nearly an hour, a pathetic spectacle under the streetlights. Their friends had vanished. The neighbors had retreated behind their curtains. It was just the two of them, their dream turned to ash in a single evening. The anger, he said, came first, directed at everyone but themselves. Then the blame started. Tiffany accused Jamal of being weak, of not handling me properly. Jamal accused her of being greedy, of pushing him into a corner. The foundation of their partnership, built on the shifting sands of what they could get from me, crumbled the moment the treasure was gone. They ended up at a cheap motel, the silence between them more damning than any argument. The next morning, a furious Jamal stormed into the lobby of Oakwood Gardens demanding to see me. The receptionist, the same one who had checked me in, looked at him with a placid professional calm. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, checking her computer. "Mr. Monroe was discharged yesterday evening." The look on his face, Marcus said, was a picture of pure, impotent rage. He had come for a fight, for a confrontation, only to find the battlefield empty. He had lost, and he didn't even know how. That's when he made the call he should have made in the first place. He called my lawyer. Marcus said he didn't even say hello. The voice on the other end was just a raw scream of entitlement. "Where is he? Where is my father's money? What did you do with it? Marcus, let him vent. Let the storm break." When there was finally a pause for breath, Marcus's voice was calm and precise, the voice of a man holding all the cards. "Jamal," he began, "nothing was stolen. Everything was executed legally, according to your father's explicit wishes as outlined in a legally binding power of attorney. Perhaps you should have taken the time to understand the law before you tried to misuse it." He let that sink in for a moment. As for the proceeds from the sale of the house, Marcus continued, "Your father decided that money could be used to build something more meaningful than a new kitchen for your wife. He has instructed me to establish the Rose Monroe Scholarship Fund." "The what?" Jamal stammered. "Your mother's legacy," Marcus said, his voice carrying the full weight of the words. "The fund will be administered by Spelman College here in Atlanta. It will provide a full 4-year scholarship to a deserving young African-American woman studying fine arts or craftsmanship. One student every single year, in perpetuity. Your mother, who loved art and believed in the power of this community, will now be responsible for building the futures of countless young women. That is where the money is, Jamal. It is being turned into a legacy." Marcus said there was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Before Jamal could recover, Marcus delivered the next blow. "Regarding the Buick," he said matter-of-factly, "your father gifted it with a clear and legal title to a young nurse named Imani. He believes in rewarding kindness, a concept you might want to study." Finally, Jamal found his voice, a weak, desperate whisper. "And my dad? Where is he? Your father?" Marcus said, his voice firm, drawing a final, clear boundary, is safe, comfortable, and in a place of his own choosing. He has asked for his privacy to be respected. From this point forward, all communication will go through my office. Do you understand? Marcus didn't wait for an answer. He hung up. They had lost everything because they never understood what was truly valuable. They saw a house, an asset to be liquidated. I saw a legacy. They saw me as a burden to be managed. I saw myself as a man who still had something to build. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is a fire that consumes everything and leaves you with ashes. This was about restoration. I didn't destroy their future. I simply refused to let them steal mine. Instead, I invested it. I invested it in the memory of my wife, in the future of my community, and in the simple, profound power of a single act of kindness. That is a return on investment they will never understand. My new life began not with a bang, but with the quiet scent of fresh coffee and sawdust. My apartment is smaller than the house, of course, but the light is better. A big window looks out over the Atlanta skyline, and in the morning the sun spills across the floorboards. I chose this place myself. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall is here because I wanted it to be. There is no greater luxury than the freedom of choice. Most days you can find me here at my small workbench by the window. My hands, which they thought were too old and frail to be of any use, are busy again. I am working on a small, intricate box carved from a piece of walnut I've had for years. It's a gift for someone I haven't met yet. On the table next to my tools, there is a letter. It's on thick, cream-colored paper. The handwriting is young and full of hope. It's from the first recipient of the Rose Monroe Scholarship Fund. Her name is Anissa. She writes that she is the first person in her family to go to college. She writes about her dream of becoming an art teacher, of bringing beauty into the world. She writes that my wife's legacy has given her a chance she never thought she would have. I have read that letter a dozen times. Each time it reminds me that what I lost was just a building. What I built in its place is a future. I look at my hands covered in a fine layer of sawdust. I look at the letter, a promise fulfilled, and I look out the window at the bustling city, a world full of doors waiting to be opened. I am not lonely here. I am free. They took my house, but in doing so, they gave me back my life. A house is built with wood and nails, but a life must be built with dignity and respect. My wife Rose, she would have liked this. She would have loved this. Our true legacy was never in the walls we owned, but in the doors we could open for others. And I, at 75 years old, finally learned how to open that door for myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own thoughts on family and legacy in the comments below. Your voice matters. This story teaches us that true strength is not loud, but quiet, patient, and often underestimated. It reveals that our greatest assets are not material possessions, but our integrity, our minds, and the legacies we choose to build. Elijah's victory wasn't in punishment, but in transformation, turning a source of greed into a wellspring of hope for future generations. It is a powerful reminder that we must never allow others to define our worth or write our final chapter. True power lies in reclaiming our own narrative with dignity and ensuring our life's work builds something that will outlast us. What did you think of the way Elijah created his final legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below.